more than 700 years, a giant stone tomb in a church in Italy claimed to contain the remains of one of the most influential men in Christian history. Pilgrims traveled across Europe to pray beside it. Popes honored it, artists covered it in marble and gold, and generations of Dominican monks guarded whatever was hidden inside. But over the centuries, strange rumors began to spread. Parts of the body had reportedly been removed. The skull had been separated into another reliquary. Other relics appeared elsewhere in the church, and the tomb itself had been opened multiple times since the Middle Ages. Eventually, people began asking a disturbing question. Was there anyone even inside the tomb at all? The man buried there was Domingo de Guzman, better known as Saint Dominic, founder of the Dominican order. Then, during the 20th century, under authorization from Pope Pius XII, investigators carried modern X-ray equipment into the basilica to examine the mysterious contents of the shrine. The operation was conducted quietly. The tomb wasn't fully dismantled. The remains were never publicly displayed. But when scientists finally peered inside the century-years-old reliquary, what they found stunned everyone involved. Because hidden within the shrine were discoveries nobody expected to survive after more than 700 years. Long before scientists examined his tomb, Saint Dominic was simply a priest from medieval Spain. He was born around 1170 in the Kingdom of Castile, during a period marked by famine, corruption, religious division, and political instability. According to early accounts, Dominic stood out for two reasons: his intelligence and his compassion for the poor. One medieval story claims that during a famine, Dominic sold his books to feed starving people. In the 12th century, books were enormously valuable because they had to be copied by hand onto parchment. Dominic reportedly explained his decision by saying, "How can I study from dead skins when people are dying?" As he grew older, Dominic joined a religious community attached to a cathedral in Spain. At first, there was little reason to think he would become one of the most influential men in church history. Then everything changed during a journey through southern France. At the time, a movement known as Catharism was spreading rapidly across Europe. The Cathars rejected many Catholic teachings and believed the material world itself was corrupt. But what disturbed Dominic the most wasn't simply their theology. It was the fact that many ordinary people found them convincing. The Cathar preachers lived simply, traveled lightly, and spoke directly to common people. Meanwhile, many Catholic clergy appeared wealthy and disconnected from ordinary life. Dominic concluded that the church needed educated preachers who lived simply and could defend Christian teachings publicly and intelligently. So he began traveling from town to town on foot, preaching constantly and living in radical poverty. Witnesses described him as calm, disciplined, persuasive, and deeply prayerful. Slowly, other men began joining him. In 1216, Pope Honorius III officially approved Dominic's new religious order, the Order of Preachers, better known today as the Dominicans. The order would become one of the great intellectual forces of medieval Europe. Dominicans founded schools, taught in universities, and produced influential philosophers and theologians, including Thomas Aquinas. But Dominic himself remained personally simple. He never became wealthy or politically powerful, and after his death in Bologna in 1221, his followers buried him quietly beneath the floor of a church. No one could have imagined that centuries later, scientists would still be trying to determine what remained inside his tomb. After Dominic's death, his reputation spread rapidly across Europe. Pilgrims soon began traveling to Bologna to pray near his grave. Then reports emerged claiming that miracles were occurring at the tomb. Some claimed the prayers were answered there. Others described healings, and according to medieval accounts, visitors detected a strange sweetness near the burial site, what Christians called the odor of sanctity. In 1233, only 12 years after Dominic's death, church authorities opened the grave. According to witnesses, a powerful fragrance burst from the tomb the moment it was opened. The smell was described not as decay, but as perfume. To medieval Christians, this was interpreted as a supernatural sign. The reports spread rapidly and helped accelerate Dominic's canonization. But opening the grave created a new problem. By then, Dominic had become too important to remain buried in a simple floor tomb. Over the following decades, his remains were transferred into an enormous marble shrine known as the Arca di San Domenico. Some of Italy's greatest artists contributed to it over the centuries. Even a young Michelangelo carved statues for the monument before becoming famous. But the handling of Dominic's remains gradually became complicated. The body was no longer lying untouched in a single coffin. Relics were removed, examined, and separated. In 1383, the skull itself was placed into its own ornate reliquary. Over time, uncertainty grew about what still remained inside the shrine. Some visitors believed the saint's body was still intact. Others assumed only fragments survived. Rumors spread that parts of the remains had been lost or mixed with other relics during centuries of handling. And surrounding the shrine were wax figures, decorated reliquaries, and lifelike devotional displays containing hidden bones beneath layers of art and fabric. To many visitors, it became difficult to separate history from legend. Then came the 20th century. Modern science now possessed tools capable of examining sealed relics without fully opening them. And under authorization from Pope Pius XII, a quiet investigation began. Sometime after the Second World War, investigators entered the Basilica of St. Dominic in Bologna, carrying equipment that would have been unimaginable in the Middle Ages: X-ray machines, photographic instruments, anthropological tools. For centuries, people had wondered what still remained inside the shrine. Now modern science was about to look beneath the surface. Unlike dramatic public exhumations performed for some saints, this operation was conducted quietly. The tomb wasn't completely dismantled, and the Dominicans appeared to have disturbed the relics as little as possible. The caution made sense. The shrine wasn't a simple coffin. It was a layered medieval reliquary modified repeatedly across centuries. Different relics had been separated long ago. The skull itself was housed elsewhere in a special reliquary. Researchers wanted answers. Had the remains survived centuries of transfers and handling? And could the bones inside truly belong to St. Dominic? According to Dominican accounts, investigators gained access to the inner relic chambers and began examining the remains using X-ray and direct observation. What they found astonished them. The skeletal remains were still there. After more than 7 centuries, enough survived for a detailed anthropological study. Researchers estimated Dominic's height, build, and cranial structure. Then came one of the strangest discoveries. Fragments of hair were reportedly found within the reliquary. That detail immediately attracted attention because medieval witnesses had left written description of Dominic's appearance. One nun who personally knew him described him as fair-haired or reddish blonde, with striking eyes and a thin build. According to later Dominican reports, the hair fragments appeared consistent with those ancient descriptions. The investigation went even further. Using measurements of the skull and surviving bones, experts attempted the reconstruction of St. Dominic's face. For the first time in centuries, investigators believed they could approximate what the medieval preacher had actually looked like in life. The reconstruction appeared surprisingly similar to some of the oldest artistic depictions of Dominic. Large eyes, narrow features, and a thin face. But the investigation also confirmed something important. St. Dominic was not an incorrupt saint. There was no preserved flesh hidden inside the tomb. What survived were skeletal remains carefully preserved through centuries of devotion. And in some ways, that made the story even stranger. Despite centuries of transfers, wars, repeated openings of the tomb, and the separation of the skull, investigators concluded that the shrine still contained the authentic remains of one of the most influential men in the Middle Ages. To modern visitors, the Basilica of St. Dominic can feel almost surreal. There is no single untouched coffin sealed since the Middle Ages. Instead, the church contains marble shrines, separated relics, wax figures, and devotional displays concealing bones beneath layers of art and fabric. But St. Dominic was far from unique. Throughout medieval Europe, the remains of saints were treated unlike ordinary graves. Relics were carried through cities during plagues and wars, placed beneath altars, and divided among churches across Europe. To medieval Christians, these relics represented the continued presence of the saint. But to modern historians, these practices create enormous complications. Bodies were moved, bones were separated, relics were transferred between containers, and over centuries, legends naturally grew around many of these shrines. St. Dominic's remains passed through exactly this kind of history. His tomb was opened only 12 years after his death. His remains were transferred into larger shrines. His skull was separated into its own reliquary. And generations of Dominicans continued modifying the monuments surrounding him. By the modern era, many visitors no longer understood exactly what they were seeing. And perhaps that is why the Vatican's X-ray investigation became so fascinating. For centuries, St. Dominic's tomb existed somewhere between history, devotion, rumor, and legend. Then modern science entered the story. X-rays, anthropology, forensic reconstruction. Yet even after all of that, one mystery remains impossible to explain scientifically: how a poor wandering preacher from medieval Spain transformed the religious and intellectual history of Europe. Today, visitors still gather around the massive marble shrine inside the Basilica of St. Dominic in Bologna. Most have no idea how complicated the tomb's history really is. The shrine was opened multiple times. Relics were separated, the skull was removed, and rumors spread for centuries that little or nothing of St. Dominic remained inside at all. Then, after more than 700 years, the Vatican authorized scientists to investigate the tomb using modern X-rays. What they found was not an incorrupt body hidden beneath marble. Instead, they found something historically remarkable: that the remains of St. Dominic had survived at all. Enough survived to study the bones. Enough survived to estimate his appearance. Enough survived for investigators to believe they were truly standing before the relics of the founder of the Dominican order. In many ways, the investigation revealed two worlds colliding: the medieval world of relics, shrines, and sacred tradition, and the modern world of science and forensic analysis. But St. Dominic's greatest legacy was never his tomb. It was the movement he left behind. A wandering preacher who owned almost nothing helped create one of the most influential orders in Western history. And long after kingdoms and empires disappeared, people still returned to Bologna asking the same question: what remains of St. Dominic? Science can now offer part of the answer. Hidden within the ancient shrine, fragments of the man still remain. The larger mystery, how one medieval preacher transformed Europe, is something no X-ray machine will ever explain. If you found the story of St. Dominic interesting, please like the video. And if you'd like to see more stories like this, please subscribe to the channel.